Hello and welcome to another tutorial on LaTeX for Java developers. In this lecture, I'm going to continue our discussion on having or creating a LaTeX renderer class in Java, and which feeds the text file to a PDF LaTeX, and eventually the PDF file is generated. In the past lecture, we discussed why sometimes we need to run PDF LaTeX on a text file more than one time. And we said that the reason usually is the labeling, citations, this kind of, or creating a table of content. Anything that PDF LaTeX doesn't do by itself, it has to call other binary tools that come with your text package. And we said that the whole concept here is that when you run a PDF LaTeX on a text file, it creates an auxiliary file. So PDF LaTeX goes through your document once, the very first time, and then it reads the entire text file and creates an auxiliary file, and inside the auxiliary file it's a note of what needs to be done to format your document and create the PDF file. And then in the second pass, so basically the second time that we run the PDF LaTeX on the text file, it sees that the auxiliary file has already been generated, so, and the text file hasn't been modified, so it checks the timestamp of your text file. So it disregards the text file and goes directly to the auxiliary file and starts reading it line by line and executing it to eventually format your PDF and create the PDF file. So in the previous lecture, I gave you an example here in the text file, and I put two equations, and then we saw that in the auxiliary file, two notes on two labels were generated. Actually, this is not the typical thing, and the reason this happened was because I forgot to remove the label command from the first equation. So if I don't do this, and then if I open a terminal here and then feed the PDF LaTeX tutorial5.tex, LaTeX already gives me a warning that equation 1, label equation 1 multiply defined, right? So it tells me that, hey, you're using this equation 1 as a label, but it's been defined multiple times. So there were multiply defined labels, right? So that's because I forgot to remove this, and that's why in the auxiliary file we see two notes on labels. And again, that's exactly what happens, right? The very first time you run the PDF LaTeX on the text file, it goes through your entire text file and takes a note of what needs to be done. So it says, okay, there's some text. PDF LaTeX says, I can handle this, no problem. And then these are text. We have equations, that's fine, I can handle them. But then it says that there is a label and there is a reference, and PDF LaTeX says, okay, I'm going to make a note that there is some referencing going on, and I take a note. After that, in the second run, I'll call a tool that handles these citations and referencing and stuff. So if I remove this, which is the correct thing to do, so the second equation is numbered, and we said that the label doesn't matter, I can just set it to blah, and it is going to still work fine. So so let's run our PDF LaTeX on the tutorial 5. Okay, tutorial5.tex, and then as you can see now, the second line was gone. LaTeX realized that you only have one label command, so it has to create a label because of this reference, and then the label name is blah, and it's numbering the style of this referencing is numbering, and it starts from 1, and the number that corresponds to this reference is 2, right? So it knows, it calls a command line tool that actually puts the number here and then takes care of that. So what if I remove this referencing? Then the question is, does PDF LaTeX bother to make a note on this or not? Because there is no referencing. So let's see. So PDF LaTeX tutorial5.tex, and if I click here, let's just open up the auxiliary file. So the labeling is still there, but if I open the PDF file, there is no need for, so PDF LaTeX still took a note that there is a label here, right? And this corresponds to a label of type, this is for an equation. So it also realizes that this is for an equation environment. So basically it looks at what kind of environment it is. And it says, if there is a referencing going on, I have to call another tool that handles this command, and then because it looks at the auxiliary file and says that, okay, I know what to do with the reference command. So PDF LaTeX tutorial5.tech. Okay, and let's open the PDF file, and that's fine, right? But if the auxiliary file is not generated, if there is no auxiliary file there, then PDF LaTeX in the first pass, it cannot, it just issues a warning that undefined references. You have to rerun the PDF LaTeX again to get cross references right. So if we open the PDF file, you see there's a question mark, and now the auxiliary file is generated. So we have to rerun the PDF LaTeX one more time, and then now everything is fine. And the reason I'm emphasizing this is because a lot of time when you use GUI applications that handle LaTeX, they automatically behind the scenes recognize that you're using some kind of references or adding some bibliography and some stuff like that requires the PDF LaTeX to be run more than one time, and they automatically do it for you. So you don't really recognize the fact that the PDF LaTeX is running multiple times. So just the GUI automatically basically takes care of that. But when you're trying to program creating LaTeX and you need to manually call the PDF LaTeX from the command line, you have to be careful about this fact that sometimes PDF LaTeX has to run more than one time. That has to do with the auxiliary file. And the fact that is, if there are special things that need to be done in your article, PDF LaTeX takes a note in the first run, but then in the second run and the third run, etc., it just executes those. For example, table of content. So table of content is actually more complicated because in the first run, PDF LaTeX takes a note that we have to generate a table of content. In the second run, it calls the command line tool that generates table of content, and the table of content will be generated and saved as another file in your folder. But then in the third run, PDF LaTeX grabs the result of the table of content that has already been generated, grabs that file, and puts it inside your PDF. So usually for generating table of content and adding that to your PDF, you probably need to run PDF LaTeX 3 times. The first time to generate the auxiliary file, the second time so that the table of content is generated and saved as a separate file in your folder. The third time, PDF LaTeX grabs that result, that table of content, and puts it inside your PDF LaTeX. And we will definitely look at this table of content in the future lectures. But right now, we saw that, let me just open this text file with the text editor, and we saw that reference it's basically it's a LaTeX command. And again, anything in LaTeX eventually boils down to either an environment or a command, and we already have 2 generic classes, command and environment, that handle that. So we can, in the base, we can create a new class, call it ref, and then we're going to inherit from command, extends command. All right, and then we have to, because the command doesn't have a no arg constructor, we have to have a call to command, the superclass. But then basically what we're going to do is we're going to get only one argument, arg, and then in the superclass, the name of this command for ref is ref, and then we have this arg. And there is no option, right? So, and then the toString method will be handled. And the usefulness of this is that later on in the LaTeX renderer, if we add a method that basically you add some sort of environment, you can basically add a label to that environment. So any environment in LaTeX can have a label. So I can go even in general top level environment class and say, basically ref label, okay, and then add option, add text, public void, or maybe let's also return the environment itself, set label, and then we can say ref or a string. We just add it as a string basically label. And then what this can do, obviously this is just the pure text of the label and we want to add it as a text command, right? So this dot ref or this dot label is new ref, and then it takes the label, right? Later on when we, and then we're going to return our environment again, so return this. Let's try to see, first test our reference, so test ref. Let's have a main method here, and then test one. And here what I'm going to do is public static void test one, and I'm going to say var ref1 is new ref, and then let's call it equation 1, for example, and let's make sure that the toString method works fine. Ref1. All right, let's run this, and we say ref, and there is this problem with the square bracket. So let's see, we said that ref can take arguments, so let's see if it works fine with the arguments here. So in tutorial 5, let's open up a terminal here and make sure that the square bracket doesn't cause any problem. We can override the toString method for ref and say that most likely we don't need to have any options. So if options are empty, don't add the square bracket. So PDF LaTeX tutorial 5.tech. Let's also remove this auxiliary. So let's force the PDF LaTeX to generate the auxiliary file, and then refresh. So we still don't have. So as you can see that I guess that option tutorial 5 text. So apparently this square bracket is causing problems. So let's run this one more time, and then let's look at the auxiliary file. Okay, and let's look at the PDF. Yeah, it's not working properly. Okay, reference a square bracket. So this ref command actually doesn't allow square brackets for options, so we have to remove it. How do we remove it? So remember the command forms in the basically we said that if options is empty, what we're going to do, we're going to append this. So but we can override this and remove that functionality. So what I'm going to do here is in the ref, I just copy and paste this, and then if options is empty, we're not going to append anything. Okay, and then if I run test ref again, and as you can see now it works fine. So we had to override the toString method so that the way this command is built is slightly different. It doesn't take any options. So I'm going to check again one more time. So what we're going to do, we're going to remove this square bracket, and we go back and run our PDF LaTeX, and then again it gives us a warning in the first run, says rerun to get cross references right. So let's run this one more time, and hopefully this time it works. Yes. All right, so we have our reference, and what are we going to do? So and then in the environment, when we add this label, instead of returning this environment itself, we're going to add a label, right? So we're going to return a ref, return label. And the reason I'm doing this is that we want to return this okay, this dot label is All right, the reason we are going to do this is as when we create a text file or when we're trying to create our document, we want to, let's say we create an equation environment in Java, and then when we set the label, we have to have a handle so that we can call it later. So the way this works is like this. Let's go to test ref here, and then public static void test2 and test2. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a equation environment, new equation environment. All right, and the constructor doesn't take any parameters. So equation one, add label or set label, and then it's going to be let's say set label equation one. Okay, and then equation one basically what else? Add option. We don't want to have any option. Let's do a sysout on this equation. So run as a Java application. And right now the label wasn't added because in the environment, when we create this new label, what we're going to do is that remember we had this raw text list, right? So we have to say this or text or this dot text, text dot append or text dot add a string. We're saying that this dot label to a string. And the reason is that this is going to create basically the entire command, right? \ref label. And that's the whole purpose of this ref, right? So it creates the label, we call it the toString, and most likely we want to also go to the next line, so plus \n. So let's see if this works. And now we have this reference. Actually, we did, probably we don't need to add this because in the command, I believe at the end of any command, we're adding the \n. All right, so that's fine. That's actually more convenient for us. All right, so the so we made a mistake. So what we need to do, we need to have a command that handles the label. So okay, so we have to also create a new class called label, right? And this is also going to extend command, and then and the command is let's say it just takes one arg, right? A string label, and then the name here is the name of the command here is label, and the arg is the name of the label, right? And then the question is let me close all of this. So the idea here is that when we add a label to environment, so basically label, so we call this the label, and then basically we create a ref. So a label object creates the command \label whatever the name is, right? And then when we create a label, we have to return a ref object so that the user can use this to cite this environment in the text file. So reference create a command like ref name, basically label, right? Whatever the name of the label is, or label name and label name, because the command for creating a label and later on citing the label is different, right? So let's see, we created here now, this is the ref, this dot label, this dot label is new label, and we pass in this label a string, and then this dot label to a string, and then we return a ref, right? So that the user can get a handle of this reference. Now the problem here is that if we set the label multiple times, this is going to cause a problem, right? So maybe it's just easier to not add it to the text. Instead, we just manually because we are overriding the toString anyways. So no, this is the environment, so we can check for the label. So after the begin, check for label. So if label is not equal to null, we're going to say environment append label, and it's going to call the toString method again. And that's something that I guess we probably want to also have it. So instead of forcing to call the toString, we can pass in an object, right? And then we call the toString on it so that the user doesn't have to do this call toString explicitly. And again, I'm going to also label this as a low-level API, right? We can add any object and it automatically adds that. And then, so I hope this is clear what we're doing. We create a label. So let's also, we create a label that adds the label command to our, so after this begin document, we want to add a probably \n plus the label. And we want to also move to the next line. So label, okay. And then in order for the user that can, so that it can cite this, we also create a reference object and send it back to user. So user gets a ref object, and this ref object mimics the ref command. So later on, if user calls the toString method on it, it's going to create the ref command. So what I'm going to do, let's go back to the ref here. So let's set this as test3, and in test2 I'm going to create a label, all right, and import it from LaTeX base. And so let's call this label1. So this has to create the label command. So label, and it still creates these square brackets. So I guess this square brackets is getting a little bit annoying. So let's fix this with a Boolean add empty options. Let's set this to true. Originally, we want all of our commands to have these square brackets. And I'm going to we can make this protected, so that so it's actually a good idea to make this protected. And maybe I don't care that much about the accessibility of these. For now, I just set them to default access, which is the package level. But later on, we will decide which ones are public, which ones are private. And but because anything that inherits from this environment or command can decide whether to add this square bracket or not, I'm going to add this as protected. So later on, when we inherit from this environment, well, actually this has to be inside this command, right? So we have to put this inside the command. So as a Boolean, add empty options, and in the empty options, if options is empty, and add empty options, we're going to add this. Otherwise, we're not going to add this empty option. So therefore, in the ref, I said that I need to override the toString method, but actually I don't need to override the toString method anymore, which is very nice. So all I have to do here is that add because it's protected, I can when I inherit, I have access to it to false, right? So let's go back to test reference, start with test1. So this should create the ref command, and it is still adds this. So why is it that this is still adding the square bracket? Add empty option to false, add empty option to true. So if options is empty, okay, so if options is empty, we have to decide what to do. So we can say if add empty options, then go ahead and add this square brackets, else, there is no need for else. We're not going to add anything. Well, actually, so if name is this, else if options is empty, we're not okay. So I think this should work fine. So let's try this, because this else comes at the end when we make sure that the options is not empty. So let's see. Yeah, now it works fine. So let's I think that's it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Please stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.